Lesson 6-7, Solving Radical Equations, which is our last section of this chapter. So anytime we're talking about a radical equation, we need to have a variable underneath our radical symbol. So if I just have the square root of a number, so square root of 3, that wouldn't count as a radical equation. So the variable has to be underneath the radical for it to be considered that radical equation. And then to solve, we are going to isolate the radical and then raise both sides to whatever power we need to undo our radical. And then we're just going to continue to solve for our variable using all of the rules that we have learned up to this point. Okay. Now, as we start solving, we do need to keep in mind a couple of things. First thing is an extraneous solution. So this happens when we solve using our algebraic manipulation, so the PEMDAS or GEMMA, depending on which one you want to use. And when we go to check the answers that we find, we get a false statement. So this can happen in this process. Usually it's going to happen if we have a variable both underneath our radical symbol and on the outside of it. So we will have to check those answers. And the last thing to keep in mind when we are solving with our radical equation, we cannot have even roots equal to negative numbers. And that's because since the radical is drawn in for us, we didn't write it in to solve. So we are excluding the minus part of our answer. So anytime we have an even root equal to that negative number, that is automatically a no solution. But you do need to isolate your radical before you can make that decision. Okay. So we're just going to go through a bunch of practice problems for solving those radical equations. So as we look at problem 1, to start with, we need to isolate this radical by moving the 3 over to the other side. So I'm going to subtract the 3. So this will give me the square root of 2x minus 3 equals 5. And then to undo that radical, since it's a square root, that means that I have to square both sides. Okay. So the power and our square root cancel each other out. So we are left with 2x minus 3. And then 5 squared is 25. And here I am left with a linear equation. So now I'm following those rules to solve. So that means that we are going to add the 3 over. So I will have 2x equals 28, and then divide both sides by 2. So my x will be equal to 14 for this first answer. Okay. All right, second one, the radical is already by itself, so I'm just going to start by undoing that square root. So again, to undo a square, we have to square both sides. So this will leave me with 4x plus 1 equals 25, and now I have a linear equation, so I'm just continuing to solve using those rules. So I would subtract the 1, so 4x equals 24, divide both sides by 4, so then that means x will equal 6 for that answer. Now on my next one, I have something in front of this. So that means I need to start by dividing both sides by 2. So I will have x minus 2 to the 2/3 equals 25. Okay. Now if we go back up to that second problem, we were given the radical. Now another way to think of this is in our parentheses, so 4x plus 1. And then it would be to the 1/2 power. So when I'm squaring it, I'm going to assume that the 2 is over the 1. These two things are reciprocals of each other. Okay? So what that means then, to undo this exponent, I have to take both sides to that reciprocal power. So I'm going to raise each side to the 3/2. So when we do that, we are multiplying these two things together, And when I take 2 times 3 and then 3 times 2, that's 6 over 6, which reduces to 1. So again, those things are canceling each other out, and we are left with that x minus 2. Oops. So this will give me x minus 2. And then on the right-hand side, we are using our exponent and radical rules to simplify this. So to take 25 to the 3 halves, I need to switch forms. So that means that I am doing the square root of 25. And then we have to cube that. Okay. Now, when we wrote this in that wasn't there. So when I take the square root of this, I have to remember to include both the positive and the negative answer. So this will be plus and minus 5, and then I would need to cube that. So x minus 2 is going to equal plus and minus 125. So that means then I actually have 2 equations to solve. I have to solve x minus 2 equals 125, and then x minus 2 equals negative 125. So when I add my 2 over, one of my answers will be 127, and then on my next equation, when I add the 2, my second answer will be negative 123. So both of these are answers to problem 3. Okay. Now again, we only need to worry about this plus minus sign is if we end up taking the square root of something as we are solving in this process. So number 4, my radical part is already by itself, and I know that this represents a radical because I'm dealing with that rational exponent. So the first thing I need to do is raise both sides to that reciprocal power, so 5/3. Okay. So this will give me x plus 1 equals, and then again I'm going to switch forms to simplify this. So I have to do the cubed root of 27, and then to that 5th power. So x plus 1 equals, cubed root of 27 is 3, and then 3 to the 5th power is 243. And then to finish getting x alone, I am subtracting 1. So then I will have x equals 242 for my final answer. All right, on 5, as I'm looking at this, I have a cubed root, and it's already by itself, so I can go ahead and start my solving process. So I need to take everything to that 3rd power to get rid of a cubed root. So if this was a 4th root, then it would be to the 4th power. Okay. So 2x plus 1 equals negative 3 cubed is negative 27, and then I have that linear equation, so I'm just going to keep solving. So I would need to subtract the 1, and then divide both sides by 2. So my answer is going to be negative 14. And then next one, again, that radical is alone. It is a square root, so that means I am squaring both sides. So I will have x squared plus 3 equals 25. And then I'm subtracting the 3. So x squared equals 22. And then to undo that square, I have to take the square root of both sides. Now again, we wrote in the square root symbol, so that means that I have to account for both a positive and negative answer. So my x is going to be equal to plus and minus the square root of 22. And then I can't simplify that any further, so I'm just going to leave it. So this would be my final answer.